Anger is one of the fastest fires that burns within the human heart. It begins as a spark, small, almost invisible, but if left unchecked, it grows into something that destroys peace, relationships, and even faith. Many people think anger gives them strength, but in reality, it takes away control. And when a person loses control of their tongue and actions, they often lose something far more valuable, their inner peace. Islam teaches us something profound about anger. It is not a sign of power, but a moment of weakness. Real strength is not in how loudly you react, but in how silently you restrain yourself. The Prophet ﷺ said that the strong person is not the one who overpowers others in wrestling, but the one who controls themselves when they are angry. This is not just a teaching. It is a roadmap to emotional freedom. When anger rises, it clouds judgment. Words are spoken that cannot be taken back. Hearts are hurt that take years to heal. And sometimes relationships are destroyed in moments of emotional blindness. But in that very moment, when the heart is burning, is where the true test lies. Will you surrender to anger or will you rise above it? Inner peace does not come from controlling everything around you. It comes from controlling what is within you. The moment you realize that not everything deserves your reaction, you begin to grow. Not every insult needs a reply. Not every situation needs your anger. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It is wisdom. One of the most powerful ways to overcome anger is to remember Allah in that moment. Anger disconnects you from clarity, but remembrance reconnects you to purpose. When you pause and seek refuge in Allah, you are not just calming yourself off, you are protecting your soul from regret. Even changing your physical state, like sitting down if standing or lying down if sitting, is a way to break the chain of anger. Because Islam does not just tell us to suppress anger, it teaches us how to transform it. Another key to inner peace is forgiveness. Holding on to anger is like carrying fire in your hands, expecting the other person to burn. It only hurts you. Forgiveness is not about saying what happened was okay. It is about freeing your heart from being trapped in the past. When you forgive, you are not excusing others. You are healing yourself. And then there is patience. Patience in anger is not passive. It is active strength. It is choosing peace over reaction. It is choosing dignity over impulse. It is choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. Every time you restrain your anger for the sake of Allah, you are elevating your rank without even realizing it. Inner peace is not found in changing the world around you, but in changing the way your heart responds to it. When you learn to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, and to reflect before judging, you begin to free yourself from emotional chaos. At the end of the day, anger is temporary, but its consequences can last a lifetime. Inner peace, however, is a treasure that grows when you protect your heart from unnecessary fire. The more you control your anger, the more you protect your faith, your relationships, and your future. So the next time anger rises within you, remember, you are not being tested by the situation, you are being tested by your response. And in that response lies your true strength, your dignity, and your peace. Anger often arrives dressed as power. In the heat of the moment, it can make a person feel strong, justified, and in control. But this is one of the greatest illusions a human heart can experience. In reality, anger is not strength, it is loss of control. It is the moment when emotions overpower wisdom and reaction replaces reflection. What feels like power and anger is actually vulnerability because the person is no longer guiding themselves. They are being driven by emotion. When anger takes over, it does not build anything meaningful. Instead, it destroys patience, weakens relationships, and damages inner peace. A single moment of uncontrolled anger can lead to words that cut deeper than swords. These words cannot be erased once spoken. Even if forgiven later, they often leave emotional scars that remain in the heart for a long time. This is why many relationships, families, friendships, even marriages suffer not because of one big event, but because of repeated moments of uncontrolled anger. Anger also distorts perception. When a person is angry, they stop seeing things clearly. They begin to interpret situations through pain, assumption, and ego rather than truth and understanding. In that state, even small issues appear large, and minor misunderstandings feel like major betrayals. This distortion leads to decisions that are not based on wisdom but on emotional impulse, and often those decisions become sources of regret later on. From a spiritual perspective, anger distances the heart from peace and remembrance. It creates a storm inside the chest where calm reflection once existed. A person may still be physically present, but internally they are in chaos. That inner chaos weakens their connection with higher purpose because anger feeds ego while peace feeds faith. The more a person gives in to anger, the more they feel drained afterward, not empowered. True strength, however, is completely different. Strength is not measured by how loudly someone reacts or how harshly they respond. Strength is measured by restraint. It is the ability to pause when every emotion is pushing toward reaction. It is choosing silence when words are ready to explode. It is stepping back when the ego demands engagement. This kind of control requires courage far greater than anger ever will. In moments of anger, the real test of character appears. Anyone can react, anyone can shout, insult, or retaliate, but not everyone can hold themselves back. That restraint is what separates impulse from wisdom. It is what protects dignity when emotions are trying to destroy it. One of the most dangerous aspects of anger is that it often disguises itself as justice. A person feels, I am right, so I must react. But being right does not always mean reacting is right. Sometimes the wiser choice is to let go, to remain silent, or to delay response until the heart is calm, because justice without control becomes destruction, not correction. When a person understands that anger is not strength but weakness in disguise, they begin to change their relationship with it. They stop glorifying it and start managing it. They begin to see calmness not as passivity but as mastery. And slowly, they realize that the strongest version of themselves is not the one who reacts the fastest, but the one who remains composed even when everything inside is trying to break free. In this way, overcoming anger is not about suppressing emotion, it is about elevating character. It is about choosing wisdom over impulse, peace over pride, and control over chaos. True strength is often misunderstood. Many people associate strength with dominance, loudness, or the ability to overpower others in argument or conflict. But real strength is far quieter than that. It does not need to prove itself through aggression or reaction. Instead, it reveals itself in moments of restraint. When a person has every reason to explode, yet chooses calmness instead, self-control is the highest form of emotional intelligence and spiritual discipline. It is the ability to pause between feeling and action and to choose what is right rather than what is immediate. In that pause lies freedom, the freedom from regret, from unnecessary conflict, and from emotional chaos. A person who lacks self-control is constantly reacting to life. But a person who has mastered self-control begins to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. In moments of anger, self-control becomes the true battlefield. The heart feels heat rising, the mind races with thoughts of defense or retaliation, and the tongue is ready to speak without thinking. But this is exactly where strength is tested. A strong person does not allow emotions to dictate their behavior. Instead, they step back internally, even if not physically, and choose silence or patience over destruction. Self-control does not mean suppressing emotions. It does not mean pretending not to feel hurt or upset. Rather, it means acknowledging those emotions without letting them take over. It is the difference between feeling anger and becoming anger. One is natural, the other is dangerous. When a person becomes their emotion, they lose perspective. But when they observe it without acting on it immediately, they regain control over themselves. One of the greatest signs of strength is the ability to remain calm when provoked. Anyone can respond with anger when insulted or disrespected. That is the easiest path. But choosing not to respond in the same emotional energy requires deep inner discipline. It requires a strong heart that is not easily shaken by external words or actions. This is why self-control is not weakness. It is mastery over the self. In life, many conflicts escalate not because of the situation itself, but because of the lack of self-control in response. A small disagreement becomes a major argument because neither side chooses to pause. Words spoken in anger create misunderstandings that grow over time, but when even one person chooses restraint, the entire direction of the conflict can change. Self-control has the power to stop destruction before it begins. Spiritually, self-control is deeply connected to growth. It trains the heart to prioritize purpose over impulse. It teaches a person that not every situation deserves a reaction, and not every emotion deserves expression. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Sometimes walking away is more honorable than engaging. And sometimes patience is the highest form of dignity. A person who practices self-control begins to notice a transformation in their life. Their relationships become more stable because they are not constantly reacting emotionally. Their decisions become wiser because they are not rushed by anger. Their inner peace increases because they are no longer fighting unnecessary battles inside themselves. They begin to carry a calm presence that others can feel. Self-control also protects a person from regret. Many of the biggest regrets in life come from moments of uncontrolled emotion, words said too quickly, decisions made in anger, or actions taken without thinking. But when self-control becomes a habit, regret decreases because decisions are no longer ruled by temporary feelings. Ultimately, true strength is not about controlling others, situations, or outcomes. It is about controlling oneself. When a person can master their own reactions, they become free. Free from emotional instability, free from unnecessary conflict, and free from the burden of regret. That is the quiet but powerful reality of true strength. It begins and ends within the self. Anger is one of the most powerful emotions a human being experiences, but it is also one of the most dangerous when it takes control. In moments of anger, the mind becomes clouded, like a storm covering clear skies. Thoughts that were once balanced and rational suddenly become distorted. What was once a minor issue begins to feel like a major crisis. This is because anger does not allow the mind to see reality as it is. It reshapes reality through emotion. When a person is angry, their ability to think clearly becomes weakened. Logic takes a back seat while emotion takes the driver's seat. In that state, decisions are no longer based on wisdom or understanding, but on impulse and reaction. A person may believe they are defending themselves or correcting a situation, but in truth, they are often reacting without full awareness of the consequences. This is why anger is often described as a temporary form of madness. It removes clarity and replaces it with emotional intensity. One of the most harmful effects of anger is how it influences speech. Words spoken in anger are rarely measured or thoughtful. Instead, they are sharp, rushed, and often hurtful. In the heat of emotion, a person may say things they would never say in a calm state. These words can damage trust, break relationships, and create emotional wounds that do not heal easily. Even after the anger fades, the impact of those words remains. Regret often follows anger like a shadow. Once the mind becomes calm again, a person begins to realize what was said or done in the moment of emotional loss. This realization can bring deep guilt and sadness. They may wish to take back their words or undo their actions, but time does not move backward. What is done in anger cannot always be repaired completely, even with apologies. This is why anger is not just an emotional reaction, it is a decision maker that often leads to long-term consequences. In many cases, relationships suffer not because of a single disagreement, but because of repeated moments of anger-driven communication. Small misunderstandings escalate into major conflicts simply because neither side paused to reflect. Instead of seeking understanding, both sides react emotionally. Over time, this builds distance, resentment, and emotional pain. What could have been resolved with calm discussion becomes a long-lasting wound. Anger also creates a false sense of certainty. In that moment, a person feels completely convinced that they are right and that their reaction is justified. But this certainty is often misleading. Once calmness returns, perspective changes. The situation that once felt extreme may now appear much smaller and less significant. This shift in perception highlights how unreliable judgment can be during emotional intensity. From a deeper perspective, anger disconnects a person from their inner wisdom. Every individual has the ability to reflect, think, and choose wisely. But anger temporarily blocks that ability. It narrows focus to the immediate feeling of hurt or frustration, ignoring the bigger picture. As a result, decisions are made for short-term emotional release rather than long-term peace. The tragedy of anger is that it often solves nothing while creating many new problems. It gives a momentary feeling of relief, as if expressing emotion has provided release. But this relief is temporary, and the consequences last much longer. A moment of satisfaction can turn into days, months, or even years of regret. Learning to recognize this pattern is essential for emotional maturity. When a person understands that anger clouds judgment, they begin to create space between emotion and reaction. That space allows clarity to return. In that space, better choices can be made. Instead of reacting immediately, a person can pause, reflect, and respond in a way that preserves dignity and peace. Ultimately, anger does not just affect the moment, it shapes the future. It influences relationships, decisions, and inner peace long after the emotion itself has passed. And that is why controlling anger is not just about behavior in the present, but about protecting oneself from regret in the future. When anger rises in the heart, it feels like a storm taking over the mind and body. Thoughts become scattered, emotions become intense, and the ability to think clearly begins to fade. In that moment, one of the most powerful ways to regain balance is remembrance of Allah. It is not just a verbal act, but a deep spiritual shift that brings the heart back to peace, clarity, and control. Remembrance of Allah works like an anchor for the heart. When a person is overwhelmed by anger, they are emotionally drifting away from stability. But the moment they turn their heart toward Allah, through dhikr, prayer, or seeking refuge in Him, they reconnect with something greater than their emotion. This connection helps the heart settle, just like turbulent waters becoming still when the storm passes. It does not instantly erase the situation, but it transforms the way the situation is experienced. Anger often feeds on ego, pride, and emotional pain. It tells a person that they must react immediately, defend themselves, or prove a point. But remembrance of Allah interrupts this cycle. It reminds the heart that there is a higher purpose than reacting emotionally. It brings awareness that every action is seen, every word is recorded, and every moment is part of a greater test. This awareness alone is enough to soften the intensity of anger. One of the most powerful effects of remembrance is that it shifts focus from the problem to the creator of the problem. When attention is fully fixed on anger, the situation feels overwhelming and personal. But when the heart turns toward Allah, perspective changes. The problem becomes smaller in comparison to divine wisdom and control. This shift helps reduce emotional intensity and brings a sense of trust that things are ultimately under divine care. In moments of anger, even simple remembrance, such as saying words of praise, seeking forgiveness, or silently recalling Allah, can create a pause between emotion and reaction. That pause is extremely important. It is in that pause that control is restored. Without that pause, anger often turns into speech or action that leads to regret. But with remembrance, the heart regains its ability to choose wisely instead of reacting impulsively. Remembrance also softens the heart. Anger tends to harden emotions, making a person less patient, less forgiving, and more reactive. But remembrance has the opposite effect. It brings humility. It reminds a person of their own imperfections, their own need for mercy, and their own dependence on guidance. When the heart becomes humble, anger loses its strength. Pride cannot survive in a heart that is connected to remembrance. Another important aspect is that remembrance replaces negativity with peace. Anger fills the mind with thoughts of revenge, frustration, and resentment. These thoughts grow stronger the more they are entertained. But remembrance redirects mental energy toward calmness, gratitude, and patience. Instead of feeding anger, the heart begins to feed peace. This change does not happen instantly, but with consistent practice, it becomes a powerful habit. Remembrance of Allah is not only for moments of peace, it is especially powerful in moments of struggle. It is during emotional storms that its true effect becomes visible. When everything inside a person is urging them to react, remembrance acts as a protective barrier. It prevents the heart from being consumed by emotion and guides it back to balance. Over time, a person who consistently turns to remembrance during anger begins to transform internally. Their reactions become calmer, their speech becomes more thoughtful, and their emotional control becomes stronger. They begin to realize that peace is not found in controlling external situations, but in controlling the internal response to those situations. Ultimately, remembrance of Allah is a source of emotional healing and stability. It does not just suppress anger, it replaces it with tranquility, awareness, and strength. It teaches the heart that no emotion is stronger than connection, and no moment of anger is greater than the peace found in turning back to the Creator. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful acts a human heart can choose, yet it is also one of the most difficult. When someone hurts us, disrespects us, or causes us pain, the natural reaction is to hold on to that pain. The mind replays the situation again and again, the heart feels heavy, and anger slowly turns into resentment. But what many people do not realize is that holding on to anger does not punish the other person. It slowly poisons the one who holds it. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is not weakness. It is liberation. When a person refuses to forgive, they unknowingly carry the burden of the past into their present life. Every time they think about what happened, they relive the pain. This creates emotional exhaustion. The heart becomes trapped in a cycle where it cannot fully move forward because it is constantly tied to what happened before. In this way, anger becomes a chain and forgiveness becomes the key that breaks it. Forgiveness does not mean that what happened was acceptable. It does not mean ignoring injustice or pretending that pain did not exist. Instead, it means choosing not to let that pain control your inner world anymore. It is a decision to separate your emotional peace from someone else's mistake. When a person forgives, they are not saying, "You were right." They are saying, "I will not let this hurt define my life anymore." One of the most important aspects of forgiveness is that it brings freedom to the heart. A heart that holds grudges is always heavy. It carries conversations that were never resolved, moments that cannot be changed, and emotions that keep resurfacing. This emotional weight affects daily life. It can influence how a person treats others, how they think about themselves, and how they see the world. But when forgiveness enters the heart, that weight begins to lift. The mind becomes lighter, and the soul feels at ease. Forgiveness also breaks the cycle of anger. When anger is not released, it often grows over time. What starts as hurt can turn into bitterness, and bitterness can turn into long-term resentment. This cycle can quietly damage relationships even when no further conflict exists, but forgiveness interrupts this cycle. It prevents the heart from continuously feeding on negative emotions and allows healing to begin. Another powerful effect of forgiveness is that it restores inner peace. A person cannot truly experience peace while carrying hatred or resentment. Even if everything in their life appears normal on the outside, internally they remain disturbed. Thoughts of revenge, anger, or unresolved feelings continue to disturb the mind. But when forgiveness is chosen, the heart is no longer tied to those emotions. Peace becomes possible again because emotional resistance is released. Forgiveness also reflects emotional maturity and strength. It takes strength to hold on to anger, but it takes even greater strength to let it go. Letting go requires humility, patience, and self-awareness. It requires a person to rise above their ego and choose healing over retaliation. In doing so, They gain control over their emotions instead of being controlled by them. From a spiritual perspective, forgiveness brings deep reward and elevation of character. It aligns the heart with mercy, compassion, and humility. A person who forgives is not only freeing themselves from emotional burden, but also growing in their spiritual journey. They begin to embody qualities that bring them closer to inner tranquility and higher purpose. In daily life, forgiveness transforms relationships as well. It allows communication to heal, misunderstandings to soften, and distance to close. Not every relationship can be restored completely, but forgiveness ensures that even if physical distance remains, emotional peace is achieved. Without forgiveness, even close relationships remain emotionally distant because unresolved anger creates invisible barriers. Ultimately, forgiveness is not about others. It is about you. It is about choosing peace over pain, clarity over confusion, and freedom over emotional captivity. When a person forgives, they are not changing the past, but they are changing the impact the past has on their present and future. And in that decision, the heart finally learns how to breathe freely again. Patience is one of the most powerful qualities a person can develop, especially in moments of anger, difficulty, and emotional pressure. It is not passive weakness, nor is it simply waiting for time to pass. True patience is active strength. It is the ability to hold yourself steady when everything inside you wants to react. It is choosing calmness when emotion is pushing toward chaos, and it is through this choice that a person begins to experience real inner peace and spiritual growth. In life, challenges are unavoidable. People will say things that hurt, situations will unfold that feel unfair, and emotions will rise that feel overwhelming. In these moments, the natural response is often anger, frustration, or impulsive reaction. But patience creates a different path. It creates a pause between what happens to you and how you respond to it. In that pause lies your true power. When a person practices patience, they are not denying their emotions. They are acknowledging them without being controlled by them. This is a crucial difference. Emotions are natural and human, but allowing emotions to dictate behavior often leads to regret. Patience allows emotions to exist while ensuring that actions remain guided by wisdom rather than impulse. One of the greatest benefits of patience is inner peace. A patient heart is not constantly disturbed by external events. Instead of reacting to every situation, it learns to observe, reflect, and respond calmly. This reduces emotional stress and mental exhaustion. When a person is always reacting, their mind remains in a constant state of tension. But when they choose patience, they allow their mind to settle and their heart to become more peaceful. Patience also protects a person from many mistakes. In moments of anger or frustration, people often say things they do not mean or take actions they later regret. These moments can damage relationships, create misunderstandings, and lead to long-term consequences. Patience acts as a protective barrier against these impulsive decisions. It gives the mind time to think clearly before acting. From a spiritual perspective, patience is a sign of deep faith and trust. It reflects the understanding that not everything needs an immediate reaction, and that every situation has wisdom behind it, even if it is not immediately visible. A patient person trusts that difficulties are part of a greater plan, and that every challenge carries meaning, growth, or hidden benefit. This trust brings comfort to the heart. Even during hardship, patience also strengthens character. A person who can remain calm in difficulty develops emotional resilience. They become less easily shaken by problems and more stable in their reactions. Over time, this creates a strong personality that is not easily controlled by external circumstances. Such a person becomes dependable, thoughtful, and balanced in their decisions. Another important aspect of patience is that it improves relationships. Many conflicts arise because of immediate reactions, words spoken in anger, assumptions made too quickly, or misunderstandings that escalate unnecessarily. When patience is practiced, communication becomes more thoughtful. Instead of reacting emotionally, a person listens, understands, and responds with care. This reduces conflict and builds stronger, healthier relationships. Patience also leads to long-term peace because it prevents emotional buildup. When anger is repeatedly expressed without control, it often creates more problems and deeper emotional wounds. But when patience is practiced, emotions are managed in a healthier way, preventing unnecessary escalation. This allows the heart to remain lighter and less burdened over time. Ultimately, patience is not just about waiting. It is about spiritual and emotional maturity. It is the ability to rise above instant reactions and choose what is right over what is immediate. It transforms anger into calmness, confusion into clarity, and emotional chaos into stability. And through this transformation, a person does not just gain control over situations. They gain control over themselves. In this way, patience becomes the foundation of inner peace and spiritual growth. It teaches that real strength is not found in reaction, but in restraint. And the more a person practices patience, the more their heart moves toward lasting peace, wisdom, and balance in life.